Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Mary Dicaro. Mary Dicaro is the author of Staying Healthy, Living Longer, 7 Powerful Principles for a Healthier You. Mary Dicaro is a physical therapist, and you can find out more about Mary Dicaro and her wonderful work at her website, mdtherapyandwellness.com. Welcome, Mary Dicaro.
Thank you so much, Catherine. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today.
So, Mary Dicaro, what led you to your quest and discovery to find the root cause of disease?
Catherine, I think a lot of us realize that we are really kind of forced to transform and rediscover things when we are in a state of like suffering. Pain, suffering, and hardship really kind of brings out our innermost spirit that we can really try to find answers to things and quest for things. So in my journey, I had a lot of just really intense health problems that just were not being solved. I went to doctor and specialists, and I had chronic pain. I had, you name it, thyroid issues. And so a lot of it was just being snuffed off as we run all these tests. We can't find anything wrong with you. Here's a prescription, or you need to learn to live with it. And so it became a point in my life where I became almost kind of hopeless feeling. And so I realized that if I was going to start feeling better, I needed to take things into my own hands and just dig a little bit deeper. So I started doing education and taking class after class on nutrition and wellness and functional medicine, and just tried to learn the mind-body connection and trying to figure this all out on my own, because I was reaching one dead end after another. And I'm sure, and I saw this in my patients too, because a lot of my patients were encountering the same sorts of issues. Year after year, it would be many different diseases that were coming up, and they were on all different kinds of meds, and they just were not making progress. And I saw their suffering, and I saw their hopelessness starting. So I did this for myself and also to help other people, to try to really be a facilitator, to help people understand and get the word out that there are ways that you can heal yourself, and they may not all be rooted in the medical traditional model, which we come to depend on. And being trained in that as well, I kind of were looking for answers from the medical doctors, and really was not, as you know, not reaching a lot of conclusions that were helping me. So my goal was then to just really make it a mission to reach people and to help bring that message out there.
So today for our audience, so bringing it back to you, our audience, what we're going to be talking about, what Mary Dicaro and I are going to be talking about, is one of my favorite subjects to talk about with my clients, which is inflammation. And we're going to help you understand what inflammation is, what causes inflammation, how you know you have inflammation, and some of the ways that you can lower your inflammation. So first of all, Mary Dicaro, can you explain for our audience what is inflammation in the body?
Yes, okay, so we kind of have to distinguish between inflammation that's acute and one that's chronic. And inflammation is just a natural, normal process in the body that is a response to a threat or some sort of an injury. And it's designed to save us. It's designed to help us. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. We have to distinguish between the two. So acute inflammation is when you turn your ankle, you're walking down the street, you sprain your ankle, and it becomes red and swollen and very painful. Or you cut your hand, I've done many times in the kitchen chopping vegetables. And so you end up having this immediate response of increased blood flow, swelling, redness, and pain. And the body has this wonderful ability to send these specialized cells to the area to heal the area. And just, when it's all said and done, it's a self-limiting process that leads to healing.
Right. Now, for our audience,
and this inflammation goes unchecked, and it's basically ongoing and smoldering in the body. It's just this silent condition that affects the entire body, and it puts us in and we call systemic or full body inflammation. So that's the difference between the two, and we need to understand that. So basically, when we talk about chronic systemic inflammation, that is the type that is leading to about 90% of all chronic diseases that we consider to be diseases of aging, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, even just high blood pressure, things of that nature are all related to the cellular internal inflammation that we're all kind of feeling right now. So it's really kind of important to understand that this inflammation is basically causing muscle loss. Sarcopenia is the condition of muscle loss, osteoporosis, bone loss. It's causing the obvious things such as the cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, the arteries, memory issues, cognitive issues, things like Alzheimer's and cognitive and memory loss is a lot of inflammation of the brain. So this is a widespread problem that we need to really understand.
Now, in my work as a medical intuitive healer, I like to simplify things so that just the average person can understand some of these concepts. And the best way that I like to explain inflammation, Mary Dicaro, is that inflammation is like fire in the body. And I say, you know what? I can take just a little old match, just a single match, throw it on the floor and burn down the entire house. And I know people who've, literally lost their house because of, a very small fire that started in the house. And so when you understand that inflammation is like fire in the body, it can affect literally every organ system. And one of the simplest ways that for our audience that you can tell whether or not you have inflammation is if you have pain. If you have pain anywhere in the body, you definitely have inflammation. And if you have any degenerative disease of aging ending in itis, as in arthritis or osteoarthritis or colitis, any disease ending in itis, you have inflammation. So again, to simplify it, inflammation is like fire in the body. It can affect literally any organ system. And just like fire can burn down a house or a forest, such as we're seeing in California, just literally hundreds of millions of acres are being destroyed by fire. It's a very powerful element. And so inflammation can break down everything from your bone to your brain chemistry, to your brain tissue, to your muscles. And when we want to delay the aging process or get out of pain, one of the first things you have to do is reduce or eliminate inflammation. And it's also very important to understand that 70% of inflammation begins in our gut. And that is why diet is so important. And we're going to be talking about diet and what to eat and what not to eat. Okay, I'd love to hear how you explain it, Mary Dicaro, and I'll explain it the way I explain it. But again, it's like fire, and you can tell if you're in pain, you're definitely inflamed. If you have any disease ending in itis, you definitely have inflammation. But the good news is, if you listen to what we're going to be talking about today, you can lower your inflammation, lower your pain naturally without drugs, and also reduce your degenerative diseases of aging. So Mary Dicaro, in your professional opinion, the author of Staying Healthy, Living Longer, 7 Powerful Principles for a Healthier You, what are the primary drivers of inflammation in your years of experience?
Okay, that's an excellent question, Catherine. I think that we are exposed right now to a food system that is agriculturally, the farming practices, the agriculture has changed over the years. We have so many new different types of food-like substances. I really don't want to call them food, but basically it's our nutrition. It's what we are eating 3 times a day. And when you think about that, we put pounds of food in our body every day, how can we deny that it's not changing our cells and changing our biochemistry and all of that? So we are literally, number one cause of inflammation, in my opinion, is the fact that we are eating a diet that is highly inflammatory. We call it the standard American diet, or SAD. And basically that diet consists of a lot of highly processed foods. Approximately 70% of our standard American diet is highly processed food, which means that it's been through the rigors of depletion, and then they've tried to restore it and they've enhanced it. And so there's been, you look at a package and you see multiple ingredients and you can't pronounce half of them. The other problem is that we are eating a lot more sugar than we ever have. Sugar is highly inflammatory. We are eating approximately 150 pounds of sugar every single year. This is a big problem for our cells. It's creating insulin resistance, which is an inflammatory process in the body that leads to diabetes. Our bodies become less sensitive to insulin, which is the messenger, that the key that brings the sugar into the cell so that it can metabolize that sugar for energy. Our muscles depend on it, our heart, our brain. So if we're insulin resistant, that's a problem for many organ systems. And it becomes body-wide. Every single organ becomes resistant to insulin. So the high sugar, high carb, refined grains, we've never had as many refined grains. We're eating about 50% more refined grains in our diets than we ever have. We have a lot of inflammatory industrial seed oils, which are not natural. They're produced in a lab, in a factory, and they are inflammatory to the body. We should have a balance of omega-3 fatty acids to omega-6 fatty acids, and we generally should have that at about 2-to-1 in favor of omega-3, and we are at about 20-to-1 in favor of omega-6. So omega-6 are the pro-inflammatory seed oils that we use, that are in a lot of packaged foods, a lot of processed foods. So we need to really be watchful of what we're putting in our body, because that is the #1 reason why we've become very disease prone in our country and all over the place. Because again, the Western diet is going everywhere, all over the world, and it's creating with it in its wake a lot of inflammatory conditions that are preventable.
Great explanation. So I'm going to explain it the way that I like to explain it. And Mary Dicaro, you've had great points that are so important, and I really hope our audience is paying attention if you're wanting to be healthy and get out of pain. So this is the way I explain it. So I came up with a simple sentence a long time ago, because what I find is if I can make things simple, people understand it. So just like you wouldn't want to have a fire in your house, except maybe in the fireplace in a controlled environment, and you can understand how you can burn down a whole house with fire, and you can literally destroy your entire health with inflammation. I came up with a really simple sentence. Okay, so if you don't remember anything that Mary Dicaro and I say today, this is what I want you to remember. Nobody in their right mind eats cats. Nobody in their right mind eats cats, right? Okay, so what are cats? Cats are pro-inflammatory foods. So pro-inflammatory foods are foods that are going to really set off this fire type reaction in your body. Caffeine. So this is your coffee. This is your black tea. This is your caffeinated sodas. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, so I don't want to name the obvious company that's based here in Atlanta, Georgia. So caffeinated sugary sodas. A in cats is alcohol. Okay, beer, wine, any kind of alcoholic beverage is going to be pro-inflammatory in the body. T is tobacco, cigarettes, chewing tobacco, cigars, any kind of tobacco product is very pro-inflammatory. And then the S, as Mary mentioned, is sugar, which is incredibly pro-inflammatory. And I have a really great story for our audience about this, about sugar and inflammation. And then I call you, so you want to reduce or eliminate the cats in your diet, the caffeine, alcohol, tobacco, and sugar. And then what I call friends of cats. So what are friends of cats? Fried foods. One of my clients asked me one time, well, what's wrong with French fries? Don't we all love French fries? I can raise my hand, guilty as charged. We all love that stuff, but it's very pro-inflammatory. And part of it is the oils that Mary mentioned, right? So if you're cooking in coconut oil, which is anti-inflammatory, that's a different story. So you want to use coconut oil at high heat cooking and olive oil at room temperature. So friends of cats, fried foods, and gluten. And many people in our culture are not technically celiac, okay? So they're not technically allergic to wheat, but wheat products are incredibly pro-inflammatory. And in this culture, in the United States at least, the way that wheat is farmed is that it's sprayed with glyphosate. Now, what is glyphosate? Glyphosate is Roundup. It's a neurotoxin. It destroys your health. It's a known carcinogen. It will interfere with your metabolic processes. So in our culture, wheat is sprayed with glyphosate before it's harvested. So even if you've gone to the doctor and they say, well, you're not allergic to wheat, you may notice that wheat products are highly, highly pro-inflammatory in your body. So big picture, when you want to reduce your inflammation, you want to reduce or eliminate cats. Now, let me also make a comment because I'm super practical. And I tell people, if you are sick or overweight, you want to really work on the 90-10 rule, which is 90% of the time eating a super, super healthy diet, really seeing your food as medicine. And then 10% of the time you go off your reservation. You have your chocolate, you have your glass of wine within reason. But if you're healthy, if you're not overweight, if you don't have a degenerative disease of aging, if you're not in pain, then you can have a little bit more leeway. But when you want to preserve your health, you really want to eliminate or reduce the cats in your diet. And I have a really good story about sugar, because a lot of people, we hear, oh, sugar is bad for you. And you're like, well, but I really like sugar. And I'm guilty as charged. I love gummy bears. One of my favorite food groups is gummy bears. But even I know I've got to keep the gummy bears in the middle of the road. So here's a really good story about sugar and inflammation. So years ago, one of my clients got into the Halloween candy. And who hasn't done that? We've all, had times, there's lots of candy around and it's so much fun and you just eat a lot of it. Well, basically she broke out in a head to toe rash. She went to the dermatologist. The dermatologist gave her antibiotics. It made absolutely no difference. So she came to me and I told her that she was reacting to sugar. Well, she had to stop eating sugar. She actually listened to me. She stopped sugar, and this head to toe rash, it was literally in her scalp all the way down to her feet, stopped. And then she said, if she hadn't have had to stop the sugar because of the rash, she would never have believed it. But all her little aches and pains went away, and she lost 20 pounds.
No.
So, Mary Dicaro, do you have any stories from your clients about clients who switched to an anti-inflammatory diet who had really dramatic health changes?
Yes, Catherine, I have many times. I have seen drastic changes, and again, these things take time. You change your body in a process. And so I've seen people that have been really addicted to sugar, and the food manufacturing giants make it purposely addictive. So they make it they call it the bliss point, where it's just salty enough, sugary enough, and has just the right amount of fat in it, where it hooks our sensory taste buds. We get addicted. Our brain releases dopamine. I mean, it literally is an addiction. So it's very difficult to break those food addictions, whether it's gummy bears or anything else. But the thing that I've seen is people that had really poor diets. They've had, they're overweight, their body's hanging on to that weight because, again, fat is a depository for toxins. That's where we store in our adipose tissue our toxins. So again, if you're putting a lot of junk in your system, your body's going to hold on to that extra weight. And so they've had weight issues, they've had joint and muscle pain. They weren't sleeping, their hormones were all kind of messed up. So I've seen a lot of people change their diet. And again, using an elimination diet that we use in the functional medicine program is basically eliminating those primary culprits, which are gluten and a lot of the refined grains and a lot of the dairy, which is extremely inflammatory as well, sugar and soy products, And again, everybody's body is a little bit different. So there might be certain foods that are just not agreeing with
Yes.
personalized medicine approach. Food is anyway, and food is medicine, but it has to be, really personalized to the person. But I think the main offenders, which would be, like you said, gluten. There was a study out of Harvard, Dr. Alessio Fasano, you may be familiar with it, and he was a Harvard professor who found that gluten in all people, not just in celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disorder, increases a protein called zonulin, and zonulin opens up the tight junctions in the gut, the GI tract. So we have this one cell layer thick membrane that protects our bloodstream from whatever we take into our body in our GI tract. And when that becomes hyperpermeable, we call it leaky gut. And these tight junctions start to open up and allow the undigested proteins, gluten being one of them, as well as microbes like viruses, bacteria, anything of that nature into the bloodstream, where it then elicits an immune response. The immune response is a natural reaction to these invaders that are coming into the bloodstream. But yet what happens is you get, like you say, you start burning the house down. You get this systemic inflammation where you have these inflammatory cytokines, which go in and attack these invaders, these antigens. And so essentially all people have that reaction, not just celiac. So it's a widespread problem. And sometimes you don't notice it because your body does a decent job of keeping a good mucosal membrane and keeping those junctions tighter. But in other people, when they've eliminated gluten and when they have eliminated dairy, those two especially, they have seen an incredible improvement in joint pain, muscle pain, energy levels, the ability to sleep better. Their skin has cleared up because, again, gluten, once it gets into the bloodstream, it elicits that immune reaction. So you can have extra GI symptoms, things that are not even related to your stomach, such as skin rashes, joint pain, muscle pain, brain fog, headaches, migraines. Those can all be caused simply by eating these foods, these offenders. As you said, the primary one in our diet here is gluten. And as you said, it is sprayed with glyphosate, which is, again, is it the food itself, or is it what they're doing to the food prior to harvesting it that is actually eliciting this major inflammatory response in our body? The glyphosate is killing our microbiome. It's changing our gut bacteria, our flora, which is super essential for health on every single level. Our microbiome, they're coming to find out, has been a huge player in so many different health conditions. And they've related it to obesity, diabetes, cognitive decline, mood disorders, you name it. So the microbiome is this essential ecosystem in our body that is needed. We have anywhere between 10 trillion and 100 trillion bacterial DNA and their DNA living in our body. And they are almost like another organ system. They function to communicate with the brain and the entire body. So when we destroy our microbiome with the food we're eating, whether it's the type of food we're eating, like we're eating a ton of sugar, which changes our microbiome, a lot of processed foods, low fiber processed foods really alter the microbiome. And also, just like you say, the toxins, the glyphosate that is in our food is changing and altering for the worse our microbiome. It's killing off the good stuff, and it's creating an environment where pathogenic and disease-causing bacteria can actually take hold in our body, which is inflammation.
Now, several of my books address this issue of inflammation. My book, The Difference Between Pain and Suffering, where I talk about how to get out of pain naturally without drugs. I talk about an anti-inflammatory diet. And this is so critical because before COVID, the leading cause of death for Americans under the age of 50 was actually drug overdose. So people are taking too many pain medications and literally dying because they don't have this information about how to lower their inflammation naturally. And then 2 of my 10 books are also about how to heal depression naturally without drugs. And what many people don't realize is that 90% of your serotonin is produced in your GI tract. So if you've got a highly inflamed GI tract, you're not making the neurotransmitters that you need to be happy. So this anti-inflammatory diet that Mary Dicaro, author of Staying Healthy, Living Longer, 7 Powerful Principles for a Healthier You, and I are talking about, it affects your physical health, it affects your pain level, and it literally affects your mental emotional well-being. Now, let's talk about an anti-inflammatory diet. So we know that cats are bad. And like I say to my clients also, I said, just like if you know real cats in real life, if you think you're in charge of cats, you're wrong. And so when you start letting sugar into your diet, it's so easy to get out of control with it. And I've had lots of clients who say to me, when I eat the way that you tell me to eat, I eat less, I feel more full, I feel more satisfied, and I lose weight. And then when I eat the way I eat, I'm hungry all the time and I'm in pain. So it's important to understand that you can reduce the caffeine, alcohol, tobacco, sugar, fried foods, and gluten in your diet. But then you want to increase the anti-inflammatory foods. So what are anti-inflammatory foods? First thing is lots of clean, pure water. Alexander Graham Bell cured his own arthritis by drinking exclusively distilled water. So pure water pulls toxins out of your joints. So that's the simplest thing you can do. And lots of fruits and vegetables. I'm always encouraging my clients to make juices or smoothies. Health nuts will argue about which is healthier, juices or smoothies. And the correct answer is actually smoothies, because the phytochemicals are in the fiber, the pith, and the seeds. So Mary Dicaro, author of Staying Healthy, Living Longer, 7 Powerful Principles for a Healthier You. When you're advising clients what to eat to reduce inflammation, what do you recommend that they do?
Catherine, that's an excellent question. I think that there's a lot of confusion with diets in general right now. People get confused because there's so many. There's the keto, there's the paleo, there's the carnivore, there's the low carb, and so you name it. And so a lot of them have come and gone. Some of them are standing the test of time, but the one that has been studied most extensively in multiple situations as far as disease prevention is the Mediterranean diet. And that is very similar to what the cardiovascular plan is for the functional medicine program. Basically, the Mediterranean diet is one, of course, that if we've ever visited beautiful places of Italy or Greece, we're accustomed to what they eat, which is wonderful. It's a lot of fresh fish, a lot of very lean, grass-fed, naturally grazed sources of meat, protein sources. There's a lot of fruits, vegetables, lots of nuts and seeds. There's, of course, their staple is olive oil, which is an excellent anti-inflammatory oil. So the Mediterranean diet, I think, has been really shown to support the reduction of these inflammatory cytokines in the body, and specifically C-Reactive Protein and interleukin-6. So it helps the brain, it helps the heart, it helps control diabetes because it's naturally low in sugar, it's naturally low in processed grains, it's naturally low or eliminates completely all sorts of dairy. So these are the main sources that cause inflammation in the body. So it just basically eliminates them. And I always tell people that when they're starting a dietary change is to keep a journal. Journaling how their body is reacting to a food gives them the most information about their personal relationship with that food. So I can have a different relationship to gummy bears than you, and so on and so forth. So if you take a journal and you just start documenting, okay, today I woke up with a headache, I'm a little tired, sluggish feeling, my brain is kind of foggy, my joints are kind of achy. Last night I had 3 glasses of wine and some, croissants and whatever else I eat, okay? And then you start logging in your diary or this journal. And then once you make these changes and eliminate the sugars, and you start moving towards this Mediterranean diet plan, which again, little at a time, you make little small changes, you eliminate those soda drinks, and you eliminate the dairy, and you eliminate the processed grains and the gluten, and you start adding in all of these healthy foods that crowd out the bad stuff. That's the key. It's like a lot of people are like, well, I enjoy my donut in the morning. Well, okay, if you had a really high protein breakfast, or if you incorporated something in your breakfast that was satisfying with fiber or with protein, you would not have the cravings for the sugar and for the simple carbohydrates, because again, it's not going to send you up and down on that insulin blood sugar roller coaster that so many of us are riding on because of our diet. So you make this journal, you make this commitment, you journal every day how you're feeling physically and mentally and emotionally, and you see how that food is affecting your body. And you'll soon find out that once you start incorporating this Mediterranean diet, those joint pains are going to become less and less. Your sleep is going to improve. Your skin is going to clear up. You're going to start losing weight without really trying to lose weight. Your body's going to release that weight. So that's just a couple of the things that I could recommend when you're making the dietary change. It's hard to go cold turkey, especially if your diet's been on the far end of being like a poor, very standard American diet, to just make slow increases in eating the right foods, eliminating what's bothering your body, what's not agreeing with your body, drinking a lot more water to flush out as your body is trying to make this adaptation, flushing that out, the toxins. And the other suggestion that I could make, Catherine, is with a lot of people that are having difficulty with this shift is something called intermittent fasting, which a lot of people have heard about. But basically, it's shortening that window of the time that you eat from, say, all day, starting out 7 in the morning and eating up until 10 o'clock at night. A lot of people do that. And instead shortening that window where you're taking in food only between, say, 11 and 7. So you have an 8-hour window or a 10-hour window where you're eating healthy foods, and you're going to be prioritizing, again, those nutritionally dense foods that are very helpful to building the cells and health of your body. And so what that is going to do is it's going to kind of reset your metabolic, it's going to reprime your metabolic system to be more flexible, to burn either sugar or fat or protein. So you're not just living on carbs to keep you going. And it's also has been shown to help with diabetes, to help control that, and also to reduce inflammation in general. It's considered to be an anti-inflammatory adjunct to our diet, to just narrow that window down to a smaller eating window, giving our body a rest period where we're not digesting food. Digestion is the most energy draining process. And if we give our body a chance to rest, it really reduces that inflammation. Because again, as we said, taking in food into the body is the most inflammatory thing that we do. And so if we give our body that rest period, it really does help too.
Yeah, and for our audience, this intermittent fasting is not really a fast. It's really just giving your body more time to rest and digest. So Mary Dicaro, physical therapist and author, can you explain for our audience what are cytokines?
Cytokines are inflammatory proteins that are put out by the immune system in response to an inflammatory agent. And that inflammatory agent can be anything. It could be a food. It could be bacterial or viral infection. We're hearing a lot about cytokines now with the COVID being the cytokine storm. We've heard about that. So it's basically an over-response of the body, of the immune system, to an antigen or some sort of an invader. And essentially, the immune system is normally very responsive. Sometimes it over-responds. It sometimes will over-respond in the cases of what we call autoimmune disorders, which are on the rise. They're really increasing a lot. So autoimmune disorders is when we cannot determine self from non-self. We start to attack our own healthy tissues. And those are the cytokines. And sometimes they get misled. And there's something called molecular mimicry, where they mistake your bodily tissue for another protein that looks very, very similar to it. And one example is gluten. So gluten looks very similar to your thyroid. And so that's why you have Hashimoto's disease. Your inflammatory molecules will begin to attack some of those normal tissues. So cytokines are just those inflammatory proteins that are really there to help us to control inflammation, but they can get a little overzealous and out of control.
And what is C-reactive protein?
C-reactive protein is an inflammatory marker that this is the one way that we measure inflammation in the body. So sometimes, as you said, it's a silent fire inside that we really don't know what's happening. We might have pain. We might not attribute it to anything. We might think that we might just have done something, overworked ourselves or whatever. But essentially, the only way to really tell if your body has inflammation in the cells is through a protein called C-reactive protein. And that is just a simple blood test that anybody can order. You can literally walk right into your lab and order that yourself. It doesn't even have to be ordered by a doctor, but it's a really good marker to know whether or not you're in the inflammatory ranges.
And Mary Dicaro, what is the connection between diabetes and inflammation? Because as you know, most people who develop, there's type 1, which is insulin dependent diabetes, and then type 2 diabetes, which is what we see more often for people who've been, not taking care of their health for a long period of time. What is the connection, Mary Dicaro, between inflammation and diabetes?
So inflammation is oftentimes the precursor to insulin resistance and diabetes. What tends to happen is that because of our dietary and lifestyle habits, we tend to have higher inflammation in the body. We tend to then become insulin resistant. So the cells, the membranes of the cells can no longer respond to the insulin. And insulin is the only way for that glucose to get into the cell and into the little mitochondria, which are little tiny organelles that create our energy. So the only way to get that into the cell and into the mitochondria is through insulin. It's like a lock and key. So if the cell is saying, nope, not taking any insulin today, I'm resisting you, it's basically that insulin is going to keep on pumping out more. So the pancreas, the beta cells of the pancreas are going to keep trying to get more insulin into the body to push that sugar out of the bloodstream and into the cells where it belongs. Because while it's in the bloodstream, while it's sitting in the arteries and in the vessels, it's inflammatory. Insulin is very inflammatory. The sugar is inflammatory. So you want to get that out of the bloodstream as quickly as possible. And the body has mechanisms to get that blood sugar down quickly, because if it stays in the vessels, it creates inflammation in the vessels, which then can lead to heart disease and other disorders. But so to bring it on back, it's the diet and the lifestyle that increases the inflammation, which then causes the body to go into an insulin resistance, which then causes this additional inflammation in the arteries, because again, the sugar is remaining there where it should be pushed into the muscle or the heart, the brain is sitting in the bloodstream. And then what will end up happening is the insulin, to just get it out of the bloodstream any way it can, will push it into our fat cells. So insulin is actually a fat storage hormone, where it will, if it can't get it into the cells, because the cells are no longer sensitive to it, it will push it into our fat cells.
Great explanation. And this is, again, you can see, I like to use simple ways of relating to what I refer to as actual humans. I am one. So inflammation's like fire in the body. Nobody in their right mind eats cats, and we want to reduce the cats and our friends of cats in our diet. And here's a way I like to explain insulin resistance. So if I went to my neighbor with a box of donuts, the first time I come, they may go, "Oh, Catherine, how thoughtful, donuts. I haven't had donuts in a while. Thank you." And they let me in. And they let me in with a box of donuts. But let's say I keep coming back once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day. I'm always bringing my neighbors donuts. After a while, they're like, "We don't need any more donuts. We've had enough donuts." And that's how your cells are. They're like, "We have so much sugar, we can't handle it all. Please go away." And then it stays circulating and raising your inflammation, literally.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So Mary Dicaro, and you touched on this, what is the connection between inflammation and high cholesterol? Because for our audience, we have to understand that cholesterol is a repair substance in the body. So if you've gone to the doctor and they've told you your cholesterol is too high, then by definition, your inflammation is too high. What's the connection, Mary Dicaro, between inflammation, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and heart disease?
Okay, so high cholesterol, as you said, Catherine, cholesterol is blamed, but it's really the messenger that's telling you something's wrong. Don't shoot the messenger. Cholesterol is the repair product that the body uses to try to coat the arteries, because if there's been inflammatory damage to the endothelial wall, which is the inside part of the blood vessel, the body will try to repair it by bringing in fatty substance and depositing it on the artery wall. So this is why you have a buildup of cholesterol in the arteries, which leads to atherosclerosis and oftentimes cardiovascular disease. Or if it's in the kidneys, it can be renal failure. If it's in the brain, it could be, cognitive decline and stroke. So again, so the vessel health is important. And the reason why is because, again, if the cholesterol is depositing there to help you with the inflammation, it's going to eventually cause a blockage. And so that's going to cause the heart disease. And that also raises blood pressure. When there's a tube, and like you like to use an example, it's like a hose. And so if you put pressure on the hose to try to push the water through, but if you have packing in the hose and you can't, or if the hose is kinked somewhere and you're trying to get that water through the hose, it's not going to go through the hose, because again, there's these deposits of this cholesterol and these calcium substances that are actually trying to repair the artery wall, that are blocking the blood flow. And whenever there's blockage of blood flow, the heart is going to pump harder to try to push it out, and the blood pressure is going to be elevated so that it can push the necessary blood flow and oxygen to the organs. So does that answer the question? I think so.
Yes.
The cholesterol, the inflammation, and then creates the damage to the arterial wall. The cholesterol then comes in to try to fix that damage, and then it raises the blood pressure. It increases your chances of stroke, cardiovascular disease, and other diseases like that.
This is such helpful information, and I really hope everybody in our audience is really paying attention. Now, Mary Dicaro, how does stress management practices such as meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, and getting enough sleep lower our inflammation?
That's an excellent point. Okay, so stress is, I call it the unofficial Grim Reaper, because again, many of us deny we're under stress, but we are. And if we've had any stressful events in our childhood, or any time in our past, any what we call ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, these affect our nervous system and our bodily functions. It literally changes the way we are wired. So oftentimes when we've had these stressful events and they are repressed or they're suppressed in the subconscious, even though we function fairly well, we are in what we call a sympathetic overdrive. That means our nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system in particular, is on overdrive 24/7. We are literally in calamity readiness mode. We are ready to respond to any sort of disaster, like we're disaster ready. So our nervous system is ready to either go into fight, flight, or freeze. So we're either we're going to fight, we're going to run, or we're going to completely shut down. And that's how the sympathetic nervous system functions in a survival mode. And so many of us are in survival mode, and that is not the place you want to be. You want to be in a parasympathetic state, which is the other part of the autonomic nervous system, which is designed to help heal, repair, and restore. So it's our rest, digest, and repair nervous system. If we are always in sympathetic overdrive, if we are constantly feeling that we need to be threatened, we're being threatened, or we feel unsafe in our bodies because of maybe something that's happened to us in our past, that pumps out inflammatory chemicals, cortisol and adrenaline, which again, raise our heart rate, raise our blood pressure. We're constantly in this state of being ready to respond. And so it's unhealthy for our body to stay there for any length of time, because it was designed to be very short-lived. Like you consider being out and somebody's like walking behind you in a dark alley, and all of a sudden you feel your heart rate increase and your breathing increases, and you start to feel a little nervous and panicky, and they come closer and closer and closer, and they're stepping up closer behind you, and you hear them. It's like you feel like it's dark outside. You're like, where do I go? You know, it's like that nervous system is ready to make you flee. But then you find out that it's just your friend trying to show you something that they found. Okay, so then your nervous system comes back down, and you start to breathe, and you start to feel better. And so again, the parasympathetic nervous system is essential repair process. And if we don't spend most of our time there, if it's not our default mode, we're not going to heal. And we're going to have this chronic high level of inflammation in our body. So essentially, those tools that we use to bring that parasympathetic nervous system back on board, back being dominant, is yoga. Anytime where we're getting back into present moment awareness, anytime where we can reconnect to our body to feel what we're feeling. A lot of times we numb what we're feeling. We go through the day and we just push ourselves to get through a certain activity or thing, and we're not breathing right, we're holding our breath. That is all a sympathetic nervous system response. When you get to yoga and Tai Chi, where it really focuses on the awareness of the breath and bringing the breath down into the diaphragm area, deep breathing, you're going to stimulate the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve that is necessary to activate that parasympathetic response. So those tools, like you mentioned, yoga, Tai Chi, meditation, even things like just consciously just taking some slow, deep breaths. Other ways to activate the vagus nerve are, they say humming, chanting, and singing are very good for activating that vagus nerve and bringing us back into parasympathetic control. There's all sorts of ways to do it. But again, those are the main ways. And sleep, to talk about sleep, sleep is really underrated. I mean, sleep is probably one of the more important things we do to restore our bodies. And many of us don't get that restful, restorative sleep that we need to be getting. And so I really ask my patients, my clients to really prioritize sleep. And in our society today, we're kind of judged and we're kind of given accolades if we can accomplish more and more and more in our day, do and keep doing, in other words. And so we never really stop doing. We always feel like we have to accomplish more, and that makes us feel like we're productive or for whatever reason. We don't give our bodies that chance to actually come down. We're on our computers right up to the minute we go to bed. We have our screen time, our phones, we're constantly connected. So it's really hard to transition into the parasympathetic state when we've been in the sympathetic state all day long. We have to give our bodies an opportunity to do that. And the only way to do that is I tell my clients and patients to shut off their screens at least an hour to two before bed. And if they're going to be on the computer in the late evening, to wear the blue light blocking amber glasses. I keep them right at my desk, and to really limit any exposure to that blue light if they can. First thing in the morning, really important when the sun rises, to get outside in the sunlight, because that resets the melatonin, the circadian rhythm, where melatonin can then be
Wonderful information. You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today has been Mary Dicaro. Mary Dicaro is the author of Staying Healthy, Living Longer, 7 Powerful Principles for Healthier You. She's a physical therapist, and you can find out more about Mary Dicaro and her wonderful work at her website, ndtherapyandwellness.com. And remember, when you reduce your inflammation, you get out of pain, you reduce the degenerative diseases of aging, you have more energy, you feel better naturally, and you're happier. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.